Court sketches are the only images of Leo taking the stand in D.C. at the federal money laundering trial of Fugees founding member Pros Michelle.
Ready or not, refugees taking over.
And unlike these animated big-screen Leo scenes,
the defendant is in fact lying.
You have called me a liar, sir.
The Oscar winner was apparently killing them softly with his 1-hour-long testimony. At one point, the judge asked Leo to speak up. So why was Leo called to the stand? Pros is accused of accepting money from fugitive billionaire Jho Low to influence the 2012 re-election campaign of President Barack Obama. Low and Leo are connected because Low initially financed part of the 2013 film The Wolf of Wall Street with money allegedly stolen from the Malaysian government. Producers later repaid the $60 million investment. Leo has never been accused of any wrongdoing.
Millions of dollars to be made available for restitution.
Other potential witnesses that could be called to the stand include Britney Spears, Jamie Foxx, Jim Carrey, and Mark Wahlberg.
And I can't find a seconder usually when I propose this, but I don't care. I don't need a seconder. My own opinion is enough for me, and I claim the right to have it defended against any consensus, any majority, anywhere, any place, any time. And anyone who disagrees with this, pick a number, get online, and kiss my ass.
No representation is made that the quality of legal services to be performed are greater than the legal services provided by other lawyers. I'm Harry Steele. You found the Backstory Podcast, number 150. How about that, Mr. Rip?
Yep, that's a long way down the road, I tell you, 150.
And Mr. Mosely, how are things up in Birmingham area?
Oh, we're doing well. Getting a little bit of rain, which was kind of needed.
Okay, so for some reason, the only place that I can find anything about the most intriguing story of this year is on E.T., right? Actor Leonardo DiCaprio testifies in money laundering bribery trial. At the heart of the case is Jho Low, a fugitive accused of being the mastermind behind the Malaysian 1MDB scandal. So Leonardo DiCaprio testified in federal court on Monday morning as part of a trial involving international money laundering, bribery, and prominent rap artist. Pros Michelle, a founding member of the iconic 1990s hip-hop group, the Fugees, I think that's supposed to be like short for refugees, the Fugees, is accused of funneling money from a fugitive Malaysian financier through straw donors. Does this sound familiar, Mr. Rip?
Yeah.
To Barack Obama's 2012 re-election campaign. 5 years later, prosecutors say he tried to quelch an investigation into the same financier under the Donald Trump administration. So you can see why neither side would want this to get any play, right? At the heart of the case is low take ho, usually known is Jho Low. He's accused of masterminding an international money laundering and bribery scheme that stole billions from the Malaysian State Investment Fund, known as 1MDB.
Yeah, but that's like 10 years ago.
Okay, well,
that's
how
long it's taken to get here.
Okay, well, there's a lot of things that have been going on that we don't know about, but we're going to get into it. So the feds say Pros is a foreign agent. So do y'all remember which one of those guys in the Trump administration, General Flynn or whatever, was accused of being a foreign agent and not registering as such? So it's basically if you're operating as a spy and you don't identify yourself and say, hey, I'm working for the consulate over here or whatever, you don't have some non-official cover or whatever, you're in violation.
Well, in General Flynn's case, you know, he's accused of lobbying for the Russian government, or the Turkish government, I think was actually more serious, without registering as being a lobbyist.
Right. So what is the 1MBD scandal?
Yeah, at one point, Jho Low had more spending power than just about anyone on earth because he had liquid cash in his account that was stolen.
This fraud is unbelievable because Jho Low just stole billions of dollars almost overnight.
Investigators have called it one of the biggest corruption cases ever.
The center of one of the world's biggest cases of white-collar crime.
Billions of dollars vanished from the Malaysian state fund 1MDB, only to be spent on the political activities of a sitting prime minister and the lavish lifestyle of the scam's mysterious mastermind, a Chinese businessman called Jho Low.
He went on this kind of global spending spree.
He would go and just drop millions of dollars in nightclubs and bars.
As a lot of you in this room know, I like to plan my evenings and make sure that I always go to the best parties.
Gambling and women.
He had a private plane that he flew constantly around the world.
Luxury yachts and homes in the Hamptons. The quantum of the money that was stolen is so huge it makes previous frauds look almost pedestrian by comparison.
Yeah. So, the biggest story you've never heard of, right?
Right. That's pretty big.
Okay, so here's the Department of Justice website. Entertainer, businessman, and Malaysian financier indicted for conspiring to make and conceal foreign and conduit contributions during the 2012 presidential election. Right? Brandon, is your dog going to make it?
I don't know. She's 21 years old, and I put her downstairs twice, and she keeps coming up the spiral staircase and kicking the door open.
She's not having it.
Yeah, the last time I put a piece of luggage in front of the door, and she kicked it open anyway.
So Paul, pick a famous artist, Monet, Whistler. You name it, this guy owned all of this art, right? He's just plugged in at all these different levels. So the U.S. Justice Department breaks the alleged theft down into three distinct phases. The first, $1 billion defrauding under the pretense of investing in a joint venture between 1MDB and Petro Saudi. Another $1.4 billion raised by Goldman Sachs in a bond issue. Misappropriation and fraudulently diverted to a Swiss offshore company, and $1.3 billion also from money Goldman Sachs raised on the market, which was diverted to a Singapore account. A number of corrupt 1MDB officials treated the public trust as a personal bank account, Lynch told the press last week. And then, of course, you see the U.S. Department of Justice alleges that the money from this 1MDB was used to buy this Claude Monet valued at $57.5 million, right?
That sounds expensive until I'm trying to launder $3.7 billion.
Really?
Okay, so you saw in the prelim videos like Jim Carrey, Britney Spears. Here he is with Paris Hilton. So Leo's testimony is all about how, this guy, Low, likes to party, right? So one time they took his jet and they did New Year's in Sydney, and then they got on the jet and made it back around the world to make New Year's in Vegas. And, that was kind of the wise guy stuff that Leo was talking about, basically saying, all I know is this guy told me that he wanted to give a bunch of money to Obama. And I said, how much? And he said, 30 million. And I said, shit, that's a lot of money. This guy's been operating behind the scenes for a long time. There you see the department. Okay, so the indictment. This thing is hilarious, Paul. You want to talk about governmental BS. So defendants Praz Michael and Jho Low conspired to circumvent federal law against foreign influence by engaging in a scheme to funnel millions of dollars of foreign money from Jho Low into the election of the office of President of the United States so that Jho Low and Michelle could buy access to and potential influence with a candidate, the candidate's campaign, and the candidate's administration. So this is the original indictment, right? So this thing, so look at this. Foreign National A was an associate of Jho Low. Associate A and B were associates of Michaels and Jho Low. Candidate A was a candidate for the office of president of the United States. So, they can't name these people, right? Because that would trigger Brandon and the New York Times to actually take notice and read into this. So this one's just for you, Paul. I want you to know who the Republican was who was playing in this same pool of
Billionaire
money.
casino magnate, that Steve Wynn, is best known for revitalizing the Las Vegas Strip in the 80s and the 90s. His Wynn Macau resort in China is now the highest-rated resort in the world. According to Forbes, his resort overall brought in nearly $4.5 billion with a B in net revenue last year. Now Wynn has taken on a new role as finance chairman of the Republican National Committee. His focus is the 2018 midterm elections, and Steve Wynn joins us, Mr. Badass Las Vegas. At the table, Steve Wynn.
I thought we were going to explore our sexuality.
Why are you confused about that, Steve Wynn?
I'm not prepared.
All these octogenarians.
No, but congratulations on the big rating that you got. But when people think about you, they think of Las Vegas, they think of success, and then they think of you and Donald Trump together. This is such an unlikely pairing because back in the day, he called you a scumbag. You said he was all hat and no cattle. Did you two just decide, let's let bygones be bygones?
That was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Or to quote Scott Momaday, back when dogs could talk. Long time ago. And both of us are too old to have any enemies.
So how did this new partnership come together?
Well, I watched President Trump.
Well, I met this guy who'd stolen some money from the Malaysian government and said, what the hell? I could funnel some of that to this guy. I mean, what's he going to say?
Yeah.
Where there's no shade for these guys whatsoever. So, and here's, the 2012 reelection campaign through the civil forfeiture process in 2016 in 4 different bank accounts belonging to this rapper, they see $74 million. Now, this is after the $100 million that he gets from Jho Low, and then he gives it as, disbursements of $10 million to these different individuals, and then those those straw individuals give the money to the Republican National Committee or the committee to reelect Barack Obama or whomever. So anyway, biggest story that you've never heard of, and I thought it would be a good one for the 150th, because, this is the kind of story that we're going to see on 60 Minutes, when it's all said and done. But in the meantime, we got a presidential campaign to get on with, and we need not distract anybody with Chinese spies and all this other bullshit when we have so much to rely on. All the goings on right now, right, guys?
They're in into the 11th or 12th year of that thing now.
So Brandon, I saw where you had prepared I guess it's yet to be released article, but it's related to this House Bill 271, and can you just tell us a little bit about it? It's related to the isn't it they're going to eliminate the Class D felony?
Yeah, we created, felonies are divided into 3 classifications historically, A, B, and C. And then in 2015, as part of Governor Bentley's sentencing reform task force, they recommended legislation that passed creating a more minor felony, D. If you're a Class D felony and you don't have, you're not a felon, generally, you get diverted normally to like community corrections or drug court or something, where we can keep you out of the prisons unless you'd like do multiple ones of these, or like say you have a record of more violent offenses. The problem that local law enforcement is complaining about is that they're arresting these guys and they get sent out, hey, you're in community corrections, So you've got to report to a probation officer and go to some anger management and drug counseling classes or whatever you got to do in order to stay out and while you serve your probation on the outside. And our sheriffs and our police chief would rather these people go to jail like they used to with the Class C felons.
So Class D gets collapsed back up into
into Class C like it was pre-2015.
And so, Paul, essentially what we're arguing over here is this was direction for the judges handing down sentences, right? Basically saying, don't send a guy up here for 10 years for, petty whatever. I mean,
well,
yes,
that's kind of,
and yes,
there's
serious,
a group
of... they have sentencing guidelines.
Yeah, and the Appleseed Law Group, which has a grant, and what they've been doing is looking at severe and extended sentencing, and there's been a lot of inmates that have been getting out a little bit earlier due to their efforts.
Well, Brandon, I thought one interesting part of your article here was the creation of the Class D felony was a product of then Governor Robert Bentley's Prison Reform Task Force. The sentence reform legislation, Senate Bill 67, was passed in 2015 to address the problem of overcrowding in the Alabama Department of Corrections. And how did it pass? With the ACLU and the Alabama Policy Institute, one conservative and one wildly liberal, both agreeing, and it passed the Senate 27-0 in the House 100-5. Only 5 House members voted against it.
Yeah, this was very non-controversial, and law enforcement members of the House supported it. Now, Chris Sales introduced this on Thursday. This dropped. And it dropped with 48 Republican co-sponsors, including the House Majority Leader and a bunch of people that voted for it back in voted to create the Class D in 2015.
Well, it's going to change the game from a defense attorney standpoint, I promise you. And you're going to end up with people you're going to end up, hey, if they want the county jails to be detox facilities, fine by me. But this is them doing away with the Class D felony.
County jails, these are felonies.
I get it. Yeah, but you don't know how this court system works. They'll sit in the county jail for 2 years until we sentence them, and then they won't come get them for another year.
You'll get with the Class D, you can get 366 days to 5 years. But in reality, most go to, however many days in the county jail. And then, they serve the rest of their time in community corrections or drug court or on probation.
Right. They'll split their sentence. They'll give them 2 years in prison, suspend a year of the sentence for probation or whatever. Yeah. All right. Well, that's one we need to keep our eyes on, but it looks like another one that's greased to fly through like what I thought, this fentanyl measure I thought should have been like a housekeeping measure, and they've touted it as the greatest legislation accomplishment.
That was the priority of the Speaker of the House, was that get passed.
A housekeeping measure. Okay.
I mean, drug trafficking has been a major felony probably since the 90s.
Really?
What did change was in the 90s, you had your heroin, you had your cocaine, your crack, your methamphetamine, marijuana, LSD. All this is listed in the statute. There was no mention of fentanyl because at that point, fentanyl was a rarely used opioid that was only seen in like operating rooms to put you unconscious for them to do like major surgery to you. The only people administering fentanyl were anesthesiologists. Outlaw fentanyl wasn't an issue, as was street fentanyl. So basically, HB1 goes in and sets standards for trafficking for fentanyl.
All right. Well, I got a story about a guy trafficking in bullshit. You want to hear about him?
Police in Spanish Fort looking for a guy they call the TikTok trickster.
Yeah, they say this guy is a con artist, targets women on social media before stealing their money and then moving on to the next.
You know, Paul, there comes a point where there's some personal responsibility in these things. I hope they don't show any of these women.
The news, Ashlyn Mitchell on the story for us. Ashlyn, he's also wanted in other states as well, right?
Yes, he is, Lanisa and Byron. Spanish Fort PD says he has a lengthy criminal record spanning 30 years. Trisha of Spanish Fort says she was scrolling through TikTok when a man who called himself Jason Mitchell from Gulf Shores messaged her, and they began messaging back and forth.
He was supposed to be out of town working in Austin, so I was like, sure, I'll meet you, when you get back in town. He actually got me to pick him up at the Mobile airport. But police say when Trisha picked him up, he had actually just left another woman in Daphne. They say he stole her rental car, credit cards, and cash.
Our suspect came down from West Virginia with the lady that he was with. They were en route to Texas. He said he had to go square away with the IRS and take them some money. She had fronted him many thousands of dollars. He said, well, let's stop in Daphne for the night and so we can rest and we'll do the rest of the trip the next day. And then went to the Mobile airport, got in touch with our Spanish Fort resident like he had flown into the Mobile airport and said, come pick me up. Using facial recognition technology, investigators say they identified the suspect as Brenton Fillers. Police say he's left a trail of deception over the past 30 years. We find out he has over 24 aliases, 24 names that he uses. When we look at his criminal history, we find that he is wanted in Texas for the rape of an 11-year-old boy. He is wanted in the state of Tennessee for stealing a car. When we looked at that case in Tennessee, we found out the circumstances were almost identical. A lady that he just meets for a short amount of time, takes the car, and never comes back. Trisha says after a few days of spending time with him, he took her car to fix it. But she says he never came back with their car. Trisha says other victims have come forward, and they all want him brought to justice. This is unreal. How many women have probably been affected or how much they have lost from dealing with this man. And when I found out about several other charges and things, it just blew me away. And I'm hoping it'll reach enough people that maybe she's sitting beside him watching the news and boom, she sees his face. I don't know. I just hope he gets caught and that we can minimize how many other people he can do this to. And police believe he could be preying on a new woman as we speak.
Most likely.
You reckon?
Most likely. He's preying on women.
Well, there's women that do this to men on Facebook.
Correct. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, folks need to get it through their heads with a little bit of reality. I'm sure Trisha's pretty hot, but no matter how hot you are, your picture, and I get gotten some of these, invitations too, your picture on Facebook is not so attractive that people say, oh, hey, yeah, I want to marry Brandon and have a life with him, or Trisha, or whoever. It's like, hey, this is somebody who is scamming you for some reason.
Right.
It may just be for your company and, physical attributes you may give them. Or like in this case, they're actually thieves stealing stuff from you. But,
or he gets pulled over.
Overwhelmed by your sexuality, don't believe them.
So he gets pulled over and he goes, nah, man, check right here. She gave me permission to take her car. Right? I have it in a text message.
Yeah, take the car.
When you take on the position of being a thief and a con man and no regard to the law, that's when you see the brazen activity like this. I mean, it's not like he's just trying to pull one con and move on. This is how he's living, is from one con to the next con.
All right. Well,
and like Brandon said, a lot of it's reverse. A lot of it's, women against men too. So it's not sexually exclusive to just women being taken advantage of for sure.
So I don't know if you caught this, but the chief said they used facial recognition technology to identify this guy and track down his priors, right?
Yeah.
So, Paul, you were born in England, yes?
London is the most photographed, I think, of any city.
That's right. And their Met just went live with facial recognition technology that many of their citizens are calling Orwellian. Live facial recognition cameras are a form of mass surveillance, human rights campaigners have said, as the Met Police said it would press behind what it's used as game-changing technology, right? And we can imagine all the good ways that this could be used, and then Harry can think of about 10 billion ways that it can be misused.
Well, you're going to see it used whether you like it or not. You're going to see it pushed further and further out there because the facial recognition and the stuff that's coming along now is really futuristic as to what we were thinking about 5 or 10 years ago.
Really terrifying. Yeah, I agree.
I didn't say terrifying. I said futuristic.
All right, so let's talk about Altapointe. Who is Altapointe? Who is Scott Jones? And who is Sandy Stinson? So Altapointe.
Who is Bob Wells?
So Altapointe used to be Baldwin and Mobile County Mental Health, and kind of like they create a water board, they create a mental health board to provide services in the area of mental health. But if they screw up real bad and get sued, it doesn't fall back on the county, right? So Altapointe just lost a multi-million-dollar lawsuit, and I'm sure I'm screwing this up, but the thumbnail version is a teenage patient came in, very combative. They tranquilized her and tied her to a bed, and then a male came in and had his way with her while she was tied to the bed, semi-conscious. So they lose this lawsuit, and Scott Jones, who is one of the city council members over there, says, Altapointe's a real problem. They've been a real problem for a long time. He and Sandy Stimpson supposedly had a closed-door meeting.
He says the mayor stabbed him in the back. Former Mobile City Councilman Scott Jones is talking with reporters for the first time after resigning from the council Tuesday. WKRG News 5's Jeremy Jones tells you how the mayor responded to the comment.
The former city councilman says the mayor would agree with him about his take on Altapointe, but would continue to support the mental health organization with other members of the council.
There's witnesses to this. The mayor comes up to me, puts his hand on my back, pats me on the back. I am so proud that you're taking on Altapointe because somebody needs to do it.
Jones has called for the Altapointe CEO, Tyrek Schlesinger, to step down from his position, following its handling of a sexual abuse case that led to a $7 million verdict. Seeing Mayor Sandy Stimpson's support for the facility, Jones felt like his voice didn't matter.
The moment that he embraced Altapointe, he made a political statement that just cut my legs out from under me with everything I've been trying to do. You just politically stabbed me in the back.
In response to Jones's claims, the mayor and city council president C.J. Small sent us a statement that says in part, Mr. Jones's comments are a mischaracterization of the positive working relationship between the administration and the city council. It is true that Mr. Jones, the administration, and other council members do from time to time have a difference of opinion, as is expected in any form of representative government. Altapointe also gave us a statement that says in part, Altapointe's goal is to provide the quality care that Alabamians deserve. We take all complaints and incident reports seriously and investigate each one thoroughly in a robust process.
The city now plans to hold a special election to fill Jones' seat. Reporting in studio, Jeremy Jones.
I've heard complaints on Altapointe for 10 years. I mean, just pops up every now and then, complaint here and there. So when you hear about it that regularly, you can be sure something needs to be improved for sure.
A new development based on a famous house in Fairhope may be on the way to Baldwin County. A 35-acre, 13-lot retail center is in the works at the intersection of Highway 181 and 104 in Fairhope. It'll have 12-foot wide sidewalks and trails, which would later be for golf cart use. The development will be called Encounter. based on the 1976 film Close Encounters of the Third Kind, filmed in Mobile, Fairhope, and Bay Minette by, of course, director Steven Spielberg. The home featured in the movie currently sits on that property. For the latest updates.
So, Paul, you familiar with that house?
Oh, yeah. I got a little, I think it's like a second-hand shop in there lately. I don't know what's in there now.
So I have a video that I shot of this when they first started doing the grade and drain on a piece of property.
Right.
They had all the pipe stacked up out there, all the concrete pipe, culvert pipe. Holy hell, you've never seen so much culvert pipe in your life.
Look at that on 113. On between 13 and 181, that backside of Cordy's, they will have built all the way from 181 to 13.
And nobody's going to recognize 181.
No.
When you're
going to be to where you do not want to go down 181.
Right. They're going to be 3 Publix on 181. Okay, so one other thing going on up there in Montgomery, lawmakers are debating funding for more judges in Alabama. We've kind of talked about this a couple of times. Until I see some legislation, I'm not going to get my hopes up.
There's a couple of pieces of legislation that have been introduced. To my knowledge, neither of them have gotten to the floor of either house yet. I think this is still something being negotiated backdoor. There was an effort to increase funds for the general fund so that they'd have more revenue, but that died in committee.
And that's why you have some judges that are voted in office as district judges working as circuit court judges.
Temporarily for a damn decade.
Temporarily for years. Temporarily for years.
They call that a decade when you string 10 years together. So, Paul, let's do some Lagniappe. I thought this was an interesting addition in that there were several different things that blew my skirt up. The loaded letter. Did you catch that?
Right.
One? So
former Sims financial director claims total disregard of funding controls in his resignation letter. Yes, I thought that was very interesting. Go ahead.
I'm resigning not because I want to retire, but due to the lack of support for internal controls I have tried to implement, especially in purchasing, she wrote. Internal controls are the backbone of good government. Without them, there's chaos. So I ran into this up in Conecuh County when I ran into a sheriff who refused to fill out a damn purchase order. He'd just go get shit. And then the vendor would send me an invoice, and I'd say, did you get a purchase order? And so I had to send all the vendors letters and say, if you give shit to our sheriff and don't get a purchase order in return, consider it a gift to the county because we're not going to pay for it. And I'm not certain that those are the types of internal controls, but there's a threshold. Everybody's got to follow the public bid law and the public works law. And I think the public bid law is anything. The threshold for bids is $15,000. And then the public works law, they increased that. It used to be $50,000, and I think it's like $150,000 now.
That's about to change. There's legislation, I think, that moved through the House this week. I didn't do an article on it, but it's raising the threshold from $15,000 to $30,000 because of inflation.
So another one that I liked was ShipShape. SEC indicts Austell executive for alleged fraud, and this comes on the I guess the last time we talked about Austell was the congressman from the 2nd congressional district in Florida who claimed that Austell was basically the Chinese military in Australian clothing is how they described it. So, Ship Shape, they allegedly inflated their numbers and told us things that weren't true. Did you want to talk about any of these others? The Beltway Beat by Jeff Poore. If you want to get dumber, go read his column. Guess what his headline? The Dobbs decision was worth it. Yes, let's make sure that men get a third of the sex that they used to. The Dobbs decision was a major win for monogamy, I believe. I guess the big one in here is the French family.
Right.
And I thought I'd let you kind of go through that for us. So, Bay Minette police officer is cleared in deadly shooting. And this headline from Fox 10 says the family is displeased with the outcome. And this all is related to a shooting that happened back in August where this young man was pulled over for a minor traffic violation, and it escalated into a fight over a taser and this young man losing his life. There was the mayor. Now, this is where the timeline gets kind of screwy, guys. So the mayor writes a letter to the O.J. French family, and he says, now, I want you to look at the date on this. This is February 23rd. He writes a letter to Mayor French and says, hey, this has been turned over to the Major Crimes Unit, and the Major Crimes Unit has turned it over to the Attorney General's office, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Something the mayor spoke about Monday night about the community to be at peace with this conclusion.
Monday night being April 3rd.
Right. You've heard what they just said tonight. We've been listening to this for the last 6 or 7 months. Will said our hands are tied. While the investigation was ongoing, we couldn't comment and didn't. The Attorney General's letter clearing the officer is dated February 7th.
And that letter was not made available to the press.
Yeah, not February. So on February 23rd, some 2 weeks after getting this letter clearing them. Okay, so here's where we clear all that up, right? So the Baldwin County Major Crimes Unit, who got the letter from the AG, supposedly didn't inform the City of Bay Minette until April 3rd. You see this letter here, Paul?
Wait a minute, say that again.
This letter from the Major Crimes Unit,
right,
to the City of Bay Minette, clearing the officer involved, who is not he's still not named, even at this point.
Oh, no, I haven't seen this letter that you got right here.
Okay, so check out who the board members are.
Oh, yeah.
Chief Al Tolbert, Chairman, Bay Minette Police Department, right? Sheriff Mack. Come on, man.
Wait a minute. This letter is dated April 3rd,
yes.
And at April 3rd at the council meeting is when they read this?
I believe so.
Or did they read it?
I don't know.
Think they read
I don't
this.
know if they read it or not, but what I'm trying to tell you is they got this clearance letter on February 7th. Wills then writes a letter to the family February 23rd saying we don't have any control over this. And then April 3rd, they say, hey, he got cleared back in February.
Hey, I want you to send me a copy of that too, please.
Okay. So there's your timeline. Officials with the City of Bay Minette, along with the members of the Baldwin County Major Crimes Unit, have met with the French family to discuss the results of the investigation. The French family, along with their attorney, have asked the media and the public to respect their privacy as the family continues to grieve their loss. The city will honor this request. Additionally, the family has communicated to the city that their request that the community find peace with the outcome of this investigation and move forward in a cooperative way. Well, shit, Bob, that didn't quite fly, because here's a statement from Tamara French.
Official statement.
Right? And it says, other than their attorney, no comments can be made on behalf of the French family. This includes Mayor Black Eye Bob Wills. The French family has not given him permission to speak on their behalf. Therefore, his statements in tonight's city council meeting and to the media were incorrect. The fight for justice will continue. So it doesn't sound like
it'll continue in civil court, not in criminal, because the AG has cleared them. The major crimes units cleared them, and based on that, the DA really has nothing to take to a grand jury, and he's not going to.
They are not going to take this to the grand jury. And most importantly, guys,
civil damages is all the French. That may be the only way the French family gets to see the video, unless they've seen it, and we're just not aware of that, as so much other has happened here that we were not aware of till weeks after it occurred.
So so the decision in Lagniappe versus Mack was that under the guise of prosecutorial privilege, they did not have to show the video to the public until after the investigation was over. Well, it sounds to me like
makes some sense. If you're going to have a grand jury, you would rather the grand jury see it.
Yeah, for the first time, you should
than the grand jury. But until they were cleared, that makes sense. Now that the investigation is over, they've officially cleared them in this letter, and the AG's office has also sent a letter. There's no reason to hold the video because there's no longer an investigation.
But
it's all just been cleared. It's over.
Right, but the presentation that Bob made to the public was that the family was completely fine with it and wanted all this to go away. And that would be the reason for not releasing the video.
Right, and that's also not what we're hearing from one of the family members and the post that's being made. The other point that should be made is that with all due respect to the French family, if the French family had made a request like that, then I can see where people would honor the request of the French family and not bringing them into it. However, this is a concern for the community. I mean, the community, he has friends and loved ones that are not in the family, and there are a considerable amount of questions that need to be answered. And when you think somebody is stopped for a traffic stop as minor as this, and it ended up costing him his life, then, you'd like to know some of the details. Now, through my experience in filing complaints and finding out actually what was going on, as my thing would be to contact Chief Deputy AG Clay Crenshaw and ask him, okay, what was provided? What was provided to you? What made you come to this conclusion? We have allegations that stem that the police officer had been fired from one precinct and was hired by another. There's other allegations that the guy was stopped earlier, that Mr. French was stopped earlier in the day by the same police officer. And then there's other allegations that the police officer knew exactly who Mr. French was.
Okay.
Well, and once he asked him to get out of the car.
The investigation has cleared the officer. I mean,
correct.
The only way we find out any of these questions, and I understand everybody being tight-lipped now because there's probably going to be a civil lawsuit, is in a civil lawsuit. And that's,
I hope so.
Okay.
That's entirely up to the French family.
But if you read it and you look at it, you would think that the attorneys are signing off on this Bob Wills thing about let's not talk about it anymore, and that's not the case. We hadn't heard from the attorneys. We hadn't heard from any. This is all just Bob Wills talking.
Black Eye Bob.
Yeah, and I tell you
the
what,
Black
I
Eye
find
of Bay Minette.
I find it very interesting that major crimes letter that you got is dated the exact same date that they decided to read it that night.
It would be nice to have had that AG's letter back on February the 7th, but
right, but we had to get all our ducks in a row.
Absolutely.
Well, so Brandon, as a journalist, you have to be looking at this from the perspective of it's a public recording. It doesn't matter what the family wants or what the police want. It's a matter that it's a public record created by a public official in conducting his job, performing his job. And that makes it mine. That makes it everybody.
Now that the investigation is over, the officer's been cleared. So there's no compelling state case for keeping this, privileged. A news outlet could file a Freedom of Information request to see the video. Now, there's no law in Alabama saying the public has the right, or even journalists have the right to review said body cam footage. But, a Freedom of Information case, now that there's no compelling investigative interest because we have two letters, saying there's nothing to investigate, the officer did his job, this was justified killing. I kind of think you never know how Alabama court will work, but based on the Mack decision's not relevant here because there's not an ongoing investigation unless there's a federal one that I'm not aware of.
Okay, well,
what the federal's doing
on this podcast last week, we watched the tranny school shooter get killed.
Yeah.
We watched Jonathan Victor get killed by Baldwin County Sheriff's deputies on I-10. We watched Tony Tempa get smothered by a Dallas police officer sitting on his back, making fun of him. And I don't have any qualms about showing people a public document because something profane happens in it. Okay. I think people should have to watch this kind of shit. Not they should want to, they should have to. Just like they should have to get their ass out and go vote, even if it's, Donald Trump versus Grandpa Munster.
And unfortunately, and I think this may be the third time that we've said this, it's going to happen again until I think what will happen is that these civil lawsuits, the one involving the 5 people that were being chased by the sheriff's department that were killed, and then the other lawsuit that's ongoing, Jonathan Victor, who was unarmed with a fanny pack. And now, Mr. French, if this trifecta if the French lawsuit does go ahead with federal and civil, then the county is looking at a trifecta of lawsuits that all involve the police and the same problem over and over again. And that is because they are not any accountability or transparency within the police department.
Okay,
it's just not there.
So, Paul, Altapointe loses one little lawsuit, and they're calling, off with their heads, right? So, how many of these are they going to have to lose before somebody figures out that Hoss Mack is not a good sheriff?
No. They're not going to have to lose but one, Harry, because you're talking about mega millions. So when it starts to come down and it starts to rain, it's going to pour.
Okay, well, the first thing we got to do is repeal this this constitutional amendment that says nobody but Hoss Mack can run for sheriff. That would be step number 1. I mean, we've identified the problem. Now we need to take steps to get rid of the problem, and that is the sheriff of Baldwin County.
Right. And that is going to become more and more apparent within the next couple of years coming up.
Because
the AG cleared the officer in Bay Minette, who wasn't directly under the sheriff anyway. So
right.
Once the AG's office sent that letter to the major crimes unit, even if the major crimes unit was inclined to bring a case against the officer, it got very weak because then, obviously the defense would pull the AG's report and their letter as, exhibit number 1 in why my client is guilty of no criminal wrongdoing. So
Very
then they,
good point.
Once they had that letter, really the major crimes units hands were tied. And then once they came to the formal opinion, nothing bad happened here. The Baldwin County District Attorney would really be grabbing at straws to take this to a grand jury when both the AG and his own Sheriff's Department major crimes unit investigators are saying this was a justified shooting. I mean, it's possible. Again, we've not seen the evidence that this was a justified shooting.
Okay, I don't believe jack shit until I see this video for myself.
Right.
I don't believe any of it. And
I want to see some internal documents that prove
I don't give a damn if Dr. Biden or one of these world famous pathologists came out and said XYZ. Doesn't mean anything to me. Show me the video.
Whether French's civil rights were violated or the officer heroically defended his life against us.
And I'm sure if I'm a cop watching it, I have a very different perspective than a criminal, than a plaintiff's attorney, right? I would imagine I would be looking for different things, and different people from different walks of life may watch the same video and come to two different conclusions.
Absolutely.
And as a journalist, without seeing the video, all I can report on is what we've been told, and that the major crime unit has cleared the officer of any wrongdoing in the shooting death of Mr. French.
So, Brandon, podcast number 1 was inspired because the sheriff lied to us about the death of a confidential informant. He said a young man wrapped a seatbelt around his neck and jumped out of a moving car. I proved every damn bit of it to be a lie. I then went to the DA with it, who said, "What do you want me to do about it?"
He was a confidential informant, and who was his handler?
Al Tolbert.
Police Chief Al Tolbert, Bay Minette.
Well, at that time, he was
Mr. Crenshaw doesn't know about all of that.
Right, because they only tell them what they need to know.
That's
and
correct.
As far as they're concerned, we're just a bunch of hard-working guys down here in Baldwin County trying to hold it all together in this crime-ridden scum. This damn place is paradise on earth compared to 99% of the country. And the idea that there's this thin blue line of gladiators who put on badges every morning to keep all the bad people away from the good is a bunch of bullshit.
More children killed than police officers.
Yeah. So like I said, they are necessary. We need them. We need good ones. And when they do good, we say, I'm the first one to congratulate a police officer for doing his job and doing it well. I really do appreciate it. Just like anybody else that does, any other public servant that does their job and does it well. And so, Brandon, why don't you tell Paul about the special legislation? So I keep trying to tell y'all, half of the members of the legislature are retired law enforcement.
Well,
that's why
half.
You see all these.
Not half.
4 of them in the House and in the Senate.
Okay. So tell us, so there's a revolving door policy, Paul. If you retire, and of course you only got to work 25 years to get 30 years of retirement if you're a first responder, right?
Well, under Tier 1 retirement. Remember the Tier 2, which came along in 2015, changed all that. But there's legislation that passed the Senate on Thursday that would switch Tier 2 this terms, even though if you signed on under Tier 2, you knew you couldn't draw retirement until age 62, no matter how many years you served.
And how about that legislation on the cameras?
No. This is important, man. Listen. No. Finish. Okay. Brandon,
what
finish.
Passed the Senate on Tuesday changes the 2015, economic crisis deal. We were trying to save money for RSA, where, if you work for ALEA, I don't believe it applies to all law enforcement yet. if you work for Leah, and I think I'll have this out Monday, the Senate has passed legislation saying you can retire after the age of 52 with a minimum of 10-year service, or at any age with just 25 years of service. So essentially, an officer who signs on at 41, at 21, theoretically could retire when he's 46 and draw a pension from then till his, natural death.
Okay, but the trick here is if you retired, you could only make so much money.
Yeah.
Okay.
But then now there's also legislation that's been introduced that if you're retired,
here we go,
they can hire you back. And you can make the former retired police chief of Huntsville is the sponsor of this in the House. Sam Gavant's carrying it in the Senate. That you can retire, draw a pension, and then go back to work for a police. This is not just law enforcement, but all state workers or, local government workers, making it up to $52,000 a year as a retired guy drawing a full pension.
Retired full pension, you can make up to $52,000 a year by going back to work for the government, and that's the last thing we need.
This was justified on the floor by Reynolds, saying that right now they just can't get the workforce like it is, that they can't hire people. So the best thing to do would be to go out and get people that are already trained and know how to do the job and bring them back.
And they're our friends, and we want them to be able to stand around the coffee pot and scratch their butt for another 10 years.
This is not just law enforcement. This is also teachers, state workers in Montgomery. This is the whole government deal. This undoes reforms that were done back, 8 years ago when we were when we were prorating both budgets and struggling to keep the general fund operational. But we got plenty of money now, but we were short on being able to hire labor.
Not very Republican of us. That's all I can say. All right, Paul, you got anything else for this week?
No.
They're kicking around doing away with the grocery tax, which I'm sure is not going to happen, is it, Brandon? Aren't they going to give us all $400 back?
Well, there's a tax rebate deal that the governor wants to do where we get – the state had $3 billion left over from fiscal year 2022. They had nothing, they had nothing to do with. So that money rolled into 2023, which began October 1, and money has kept rolling in. We're kind of waiting till the April 15th to see how much money really rolls in here at the deadline from the tax filing. So there probably is going to be that $400 a person taxpayer rebate. Now, on Thursday, the House passed legislation that will gradually cut the top income tax rate, which most people in Alabama pay, of 5% down over 5 years to 4.95%. And they also passed legislation that increased your standard state deduction, which is a fraction of what the federal deduction is. The two of those combined will amount to $82 million a year in savings for the taxpayers. Now, you compare that to the general fund, to the education fund budget, because remember, income taxes all go to the education fund in our state's archaic budgeting system. The governor's request for the education budget is $8.9, billion. So we're talking about 0.9% of education trust fund revenues in future tax cuts. Now, and there's also, like I say, Arthur Orr, who chairs the budget committee in the Senate, has introduced legislation that will gradually repeal the 4% tax on food. But I think it starts with essentials and kind of spreads out from there.
All right, well, next go around, I want to talk about Elliott's bill to cut funding for all these different licensure boards or streamlining or whatever his harebrained scheme is. But, you know, there are a lot of us that are, you know, have professional licenses and there's good reasons for them. You know, one of the recent ones, I think it was 2017 or 18, they decided to regulate the bail bonds industry.
Yeah.
Sounds like a good idea. But you know,
at one point you could be like you could get out of prison and get a private investigator's license.
Well, that's what prisoners are for, to be private investigators.
Yeah, Rockford was a former prisoner, remember?
You're right.
You remember when we were children?
So besides this latest round, are there any sleeper bills that are going to be big surprises that, you know, you got your ear to the ground on, just waiting on them to drop? I know the dram shop law finally hit. That's, you know, reduces the requirements for people that serve alcohol to carry liability insurance.
Now, Representative Susan DuBose out of Shelby County is going to introduce a very controversial piece of legislation that will require, because as everyone's aware, we're going to have medical marijuana legal in the state of Alabama toward the end of the year, if we can get all these lawsuits straightened on who gets the permits and who doesn't. That legislation, if it passed, would require a woman who has a doctor's recommendation for legal medical marijuana to present proof that she's not pregnant.
Oh, man.
In order to get her recommendation filled. So she basically have to take routine pregnancy tests if she's between the age of 16 and I guess 50.
Oh my goodness gracious, man! What is it about these people in reproduction?
Babies, and I agree that women who are pregnant or trying to get pregnant should not take medical marijuana, but it's really nanny state for the state of Alabama to put itself in a position of telling women they have to, obey certain rules and regs that don't apply to men or,
Right.
Well, they're only 2/3 of a man.
Yeah,
height and weight wise, not vote wise.
Alcohol causes a whole lot more.
Oh man, nicotine. I mean, my goodness, come on. And all of these women, if they have a prescription for marijuana, they're under a doctor's care, and they can consult their doctor.
If he's competent, and we have a decent, standard for them to, recommend medical marijuana, they'll tell the lady, hey, if you're pregnant or you are trying to get pregnant, stop the medical marijuana. It's like the ladies out there that are pregnant or trying to get pregnant, don't go down the bar and drink. Now, you and I both know women that are trying to get pregnant will be at the bar drinking, but it would be better for their child if they did not.
That's true. All right.
Should the state be in the business of telling people that you have to have a negative pregnancy test to go to the bar? This would be the same thing here with the medical marijuana.
So, Paul, what kind of fish did you eat yesterday?
I didn't eat fish yesterday.
What? I ate seafood yesterday. I didn't eat fish. And then I also went to the barbecue place and ate some pig. And so tomorrow is Easter Sunday. Has everybody got big plans? Well, I think I'm going up to Montgomery Hill Baptist Church and the old family church in North Baldwin County. As far north as you can get in Baldwin County, by the way.
Huh.
Without being in Monroe County. And, built a couple 100 years ago, and it's still standing. And they still let me in. Can you believe it?
Few people don't know you.
Yeah, well, there's a few people there that don't know me. So, all right, guys, y'all have a good weekend and have a good Easter, and we'll see y'all next time.
Happy Easter.
Man. Take care. Happy Easter, everybody.